This is the first section of our Bhakti Shastri course, the last 60 sessions. We're going to cover the Nectar of Instruction, which we're starting today, Sri Isha Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, and the first wave of the Nectar of Devotion. And so we'll be meeting here on Saturdays at 10:30 until noon. The course classes will be recorded, and the little PowerPoints that go along with them will be available online. So if you can't make it and still want to listen to it, you're able to do that. And the tests also will be able to be done remotely. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible for people who can't come in on Saturdays, so all the time or every time. It's okay. Okay. So and also on Wednesdays there's an optional conference call. So because the Bhakti Shastri moves very quickly. We have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. And so for extra discussion, we'll have, on Wednesday evenings, there'll be an optional conference call. We won't cover new material there, but we can take further questions and answers, further discussion on the topics that we cover here. With Bhakti Shastri, there's because it moves so fast and covers so much, there's going to be a lot left on the table. The objective is to give you a strong overview of the material, so you have a good understanding of how it flows. Hopefully you'll have a good idea how to use that information, and see also, even more importantly, how the different how the different verses and the different books fit together. So we're really talking about one thing here, the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And so I want to, because oftentimes we have classes where we focus on one verse at a time, and so sometimes the connections between the verses aren't so apparent. We want to try to do that and try to give you a clear, hopefully, understanding of the topic overall. So we'll start today. We're going to cover the first 3 texts. The Nectar of Instruction has 11 texts, 11 verses in it. We'll cover the first 3 today. Next week, the 4 ones after that, and then the final 4 in the following week. So the book was written by Srila Rupa Goswami, and he was a direct disciple, Prabhupada says, of Lord Chaitanya. And he was, Prabhupada said, the leader of the 6 Goswamis. He was actually, given that task, he and the other Goswamis, of very systematically describing the philosophy of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness. That was Lord Chaitanya gave him that, kind of deputed him to do that. Lord Chaitanya only wrote down the 8 verses of the Shikshastakam. That's all the writings he left. But his teachings then were conveyed through the agency of his very close disciples, and Rupa Goswami was the chief amongst those. And Srila Prabhupada says in the preface, he says, the Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami. So he's the perfect person to describe the process of bhakti. And Prabhupada gives us in the introduction what we're supposed to get, what's supposed to come out of the Nectar of Instruction. He says, it will guide us in controlling the mind and senses. He says that's called a Goswami. The Go means the senses, and Swami means control. In Sanskrit, senses mean different than it does in the West. In the West, we have we just have the senses of perception, and those are called the jnana indriyani, the knowledge-gathering senses in Sanskrit. But then there's also the active, the karma indriyani, the senses by which we act on the world. It's like the tongue tastes, so it has perception, but it also speaks. So it's a sense of action. So there's senses of knowledge, of sensation, and senses of action. And so he says that one's supposed to learn how to control them so that we can do what we wish to do. It's supposed to take us to the mode of goodness, sattva guna, which those 2 things are practically the same. And he says, help us to become pure devotees, which is a pretty exalted goal. And then he kind of concludes, he says, the Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, that's the Sanskrit name for it, constitutes the first instructions for neophyte devotees. One should follow these instructions very strictly, then it will be easier to make one's life successful. It's a small little handbook, really, by which how you can get started and what it takes to really begin the practice of bhakti in a serious way. So let's go to the first text we'll be covering. This is about controlling the senses. It was the first objective. And the means, it says Krishnaizing the urges of the mind and senses. It's a subheading I've given it. And the verses here. Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jiva vegam udurapashta vegam etan vegan yovishahe tediraha sarvam pimam pitivim sashishat. In the translation it says, a sober person, a dhira, who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So these vegams in the Sanskrit are urges. So we experience that we have the urges to do various things. So we're distracted by these things. And then here there's in the Upanishads there's this little verse that makes the analogy between the senses and some undisciplined horses. And it says the mind are the reins. So we're trying to control them mentally. The intelligence is the driver, and then the soul in the back, looking very shocked, is the passenger. And so the notion is that if we are unable to control the various urges, we can't act in a very coherent manner. So it says anything we want to do, if we have it says a coherent, goal-oriented action depends on the ability to regulate the urges of the senses. Otherwise, right now you may as you're sitting here trying to listen, different things. Your mind wants to think about something else. You might want to move someplace else. You might be hungry, thirsty, whatever, and you will, hopefully resist them to some degree, and we'll carry on. So just for us to do anything in a coherent way, we have to be able to not be simply under the control of the various urges. So it's just a baseline necessity for any kind of purposeful action. And so Prabhupada in the purport, he talks about what it takes to control the senses. He says that, and of course, sometimes we can just have good information. He says, somebody can, I can tell you, oh, it's very cold outside. Better put on a jacket. That's easy for you to understand. You can do that. In other times, it may take a little bit more than that. So we got the few things he says is that. So on the first one, you can see the guy he knows, which is the healthier snack, but he's heard about that. But you can see where the eyes are going. He's going towards the sweet snack. We also may have seen, right, the results of making the wrong choice, and then the second part, right? And then he says we may even have experienced it. So, I guess you could argue that the squirrel there is satisfied, but he looks like he's gone a little bit too far and is suffering a little bit there. So he's experienced. Prabhupada used in the purport. He gives the example. He says someone may hear that stealing is wrong, and they are smart enough to go away from that. Someone may see somebody being arrested for it, so they may think, okay, I'm not going to try it. Or he said someone may be arrested, imprisoned, come out and still do it again. And then he says there we also, there are times when we do things that we feel regret, remorse about, and we find ourselves sometimes still doing them again. Right? So he says these things, just knowledge, experience, knowledge, seeing things, also hearing information, seeing things directly and experiencing things directly, and even if we regret our actions, these aren't enough to have control, especially when we're doing something like bhakti, which is it's a matter. It says while information, observation, experience, and regret may work in some ordinary cases, bhakti involves changing the role of the senses from serving ourselves to serving Krishna. A reversal of such deeply ingrained patterns requires a very powerful means in order to succeed. So, so for simple information, if it's cold outside, wear a coat, or you watch somebody walk by freezing, you'll do it. If you step outside and feel the freezing, that might be enough to act in a certain way. But generally, when we are dealing with things that are a little bit deeper, we've just passed the time of year where we have New Year's resolutions, where we're trying to change our behavior. and we have certain other patterns that we're attached to. In those cases, we find it's very difficult. Most of the New Year's resolutions get broken very quickly. So in bhakti, we're trying actually to reverse our whole orientation with the world. By default, we're here in this world. We think we're here. Let's, try to do the best for myself and, maybe my friends and family and, extended people like that. But in bhakti, we're trying to simply serve God. It's a reversal. We're seeing now God is the important person rather than myself. And so the senses, our urges don't necessarily follow that. And so I put a couple of quotes here, one from the Bhagavad Gita and one from the Bible. There's one by St. Paul who he says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna asks, he says, Arjuna said, O descendant of Rishi, O Krishna, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So when we try to take up the process of bhakti yoga, there's a pushback. We have a great deal of inertia. We're used to thinking and acting and doing in a certain way. And when we try to change that, those old patterns push against us. And so people in the spiritual path, they experience this thing. I really want to do this, but then I am pushed to do something different. So that's why we need to have some ability to deal with that. Otherwise, we move back and forth and don't go anywhere. And so Srila Prabhupada says, what do we need then besides information, observation, and experience, or even regret and repentance? He says that sense control requires real knowledge, is how he puts it, which is attained through the process of sadhana bhakti, which is outlined here in the Nectar of Instruction. So there's something, and he gives as a possibility. He gives first of all Ashtanga yoga. There's a process. This is a regular process. He says that we have to attain, by which we can attain real knowledge. But he says, when he outlines the steps of Ashtanga yoga, it's quite difficult. You have to control the senses to begin with. You have to withdraw your mind from all of the other senses and focus on meditation. And so he says, Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction is telling us to practice bhakti, to take up the regulated practice of bhakti, and that will result in developing a different understanding. So what will happen ultimately is we talk a lot in ISKCON about the higher taste, that when we come into contact with Krishna, when we use our senses in the service of Krishna, we get a kind of happiness that we haven't experienced before. And when that happens, that encourages us in that way. So in this verse, he gives quite a bit of different examples of how to control the various things that were listed. But first it says, let's look here. There's two senses to the word control that we generally use. And I looked up online the different definitions, and I found the two that I was thinking about. So there's the power to restrain something, especially get a grip on yourself, especially one's own emotions or actions. Give the children time to get control of their emotions, self-control, self-restraint, self-possession, self-command. We say also sometimes if you're gonna control weeds or control, it means just prevent and stop, like that. Or there's the other sense where if you're operating a machine, you're controlling your car. So the ability to manage a machine, vehicle, or other moving object. So one of them is stopping and preventing, and the other one is directing and controlling. So in bhakti, instead of trying to just use our own strength to resist, right? We had the poor guy looking at the apple and the cake. He was trying to resist. He was probably going to fail, judging by the expression on his face. And so it's a little bit like trying to hold up the rock as it's rolling down the hill by your own strength. So the other thing is, it says that we try to control them, meaning instead of using them in one way, we turn them towards Krishna, redirect the senses. And so even in physics, If there's a heavy object moving in one direction, it's easier to deflect it than it is to stop it. It takes less energy. So by nature, we're active. We're active. We want to do things. We want to hear, see, taste, touch, and smell, and we want to do things. So stopping those things is against the grain. So instead, we try to redirect them, deflect them, give them a different type of engagement. So in the purport, it's given how we do it with the various things that were listed in the verse. And so here we have the urge to speak, and it says then we speak about Krishna. We want to talk about something, so it says redirect it towards those type of topics. The mind, so the mind is always going, and it says thinking of Krishna. In the purport, it says thinking of Krishna's lotus feet, and so I put that picture there. Of course, it means anything relating to Krishna. The image of feet. There's an interesting thing about that, because when you think of thinking of the feet as being at the feet of someone, thinking of the feet of someone, it implies a certain relationship, one of subordination. And so I think when we talk about thinking about the lotus feet of Krishna, we think of ourselves as subordinate and wishing to please him. And that kind of a notion is one of the essential ingredients of bhakti. So then we have the tongue and the belly likes to taste very, very different things. And so we have Krishna prasadam, food that's been prepared with love and offered to Krishna. And then we have anger. And it says there that the anger can be used productively against those that blaspheme the Lord or his devotees. And so we have a picture here of Hanumanji, who famously lit the city of Lanka on fire. That he was captured. He was an ambassador from Lord Rama. He was trying to find Sita, who'd been kidnapped by Ravana. He was arrested, and they lit his tail on fire. And it wasn't he wasn't angry because they had done something to him personally, but he felt tremendous anger because they were disrespecting his Lord. And so then he taught them a little bit of a lesson. And then there's kama, or lust. It's Kamadev on the one side. And says the recommended procedure is to produce Krishna conscious children. We have Prahlad Maharaj. So those are the listed ways. And then there's a few additional things that he mentions in the purport about how we deal with both of those, about prasadam and kama. Because prasadam there are many, who has been to feasts, this kind of knows that there's many varieties of wonderful, tasty prasadam, and we love to feast. And so we can become very much attached to the wonderful flavors and tastes and enjoy that very, very much. So he says and there's always time for that, but Prabhupada recommends that we moderate the quantities on a day-to-day basis. And he says not too palatable. And like for Prabhupada, for himself, he had it wasn't a super simple diet, but it was a pretty straightforward one. He'd have rice and dal, chapatis and sabji. Nothing too fancy, but nothing too simple either. And they said take it at regular times, and then we have certain fasting days, Ekadashi and Janmashtami, by which we then can also practice not eating at all or restricting our eating. So that can help us in that situation. And he says about kama, he says you avoid thinking about it, avoid planning it, and you avoid talking about it. With anything, right, that you're trying to avoid, though, if you try to deflect some of the urges by thinking or planning or talking about, you're probably just going to add fuel to the fire. And then he says, restrict the association, he says, with the opposite sex. And I thought maybe by today's standards, we should thought the objects of our desire, whatever they may be. Reduce the temptation. Now, the next slide says, you've probably noticed that for some of those, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to take prasadam instead of regular food. It's pretty easy to to think about Krishna instead of thinking about something else. It's easy to speak about Krishna. But there's a couple of them here, the urges of anger and kama, that don't give a lot of opportunities to Krishnaize them. Every time you get angry, you can't go out there and try to find somebody who's a blasphemer and then beat them up. It just doesn't work that way. And the same way, that having children, that's also not something that can be done every day. So in that case, there's given some additional help in those regards in the first verse in the purport. And Srila Prabhupada says, he says, similarly, the demands of the body can be divided into three categories: the demands of the tongue, the belly, and genitals. One may observe that these three senses are physically situated in a straight line as far as the body is concerned, and that the bodily demands begin with the tongue. If one can restrain the demands of the tongue by limiting the activities to the eating of prasadam, the urges of the belly and the genitals can automatically be controlled. So there's a way to, kind of a secondary help for that, instead of just waiting for the urge and then trying to Krishnaize it. And it says, as for the agitations of the flickering mind, they are divided into two divisions. The first is called avarodha priti, or unrestricted attachment, and the other is called virodha yukta, krodha, anger arising from frustration. So most of the anger that we get really is where we want something and it's not going our way. And therefore we become angry. So he says, if one always thinks of Krishna and how to serve Krishna best, one's mind will naturally be controlled. So remember that in bhakti, we're trying to put ourselves second and Krishna first. So if we have that type of mentality, then if something goes a little wrong, we'll tend to react less angrily. It's a natural thing. We become more peaceful in that sense. We're able to tolerate little personal inconveniences. When we're really hopeful of having things be pleasant for us, have things happen the way we want, it's going to fulfill our desires, we're really attached to it. Something goes wrong, we get upset. So for the anger, the krodha, and the kama, the ones that don't have always ready ways to Krishnaize them, we try to reduce them beforehand. Do a little prevention. Is sometimes what prevention is worth an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure in these cases. Right? And then Srila Prabhupada gives a couple other things in the purport that kind of hopefully will inspire us to want to move in this direction. He says, one who practices resisting these demands or urges is called tapasvi, or one who practices austerities. And he says, by such tapasya, one can overcome victimization by the material energy, the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's something really good that comes out of it if we're successful. And he says, the conclusion is that one who can control these 6 items, speech, mind, anger, tongue, belly, and genitals, is to be called a Swami or Goswami. Following in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, all Swamis and Goswamis should fully engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As opposed to this, the Godasas engage in the servant of the senses. Go means senses. Prahlad Maharaj has further described the Godasa as Adanta Go, which refers to one whose senses are not controlled. He says, an Adanta Go cannot become a servant of Krishna. So there's a warning and there's an enticement. If we were able to control the senses nicely. So we can move on to the second text, is the 6 destroyers of bhakti. It says the point here is that you have a question? Let's wait more towards the end. We'll have a little bit of period. I mean, yeah, let's try to do that for right now. Because I think also things that you may ask now may become a little bit more clear as we go along. So let's jot down your questions. Yes, yeah, text 2. Yeah. So here's I've given it my little title here that that it's making Krishna consciousness a priority. That there's a certain kind of theme to this thing. And it's here. It's going to come right up on the board. Atyahara prayasascha prajalpa niyamagraha janasangascha lalyam cha shadbir bhaktir vinashati. So it says vinashati is destroyed. So these 6 things destroy our bhakti. The translation is, one's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1, eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. That's atihara. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. Practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual attachment, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. And 5, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness and being greedy for mundane achievements. And then in the purport, Prabhupada tells us why Krishna consciousness should be a priority. And he contrasts the Duratmas, he calls them, with the Mahatmas. So there's a nice little poetic thing going on there. The Duratma, Dur is a kind of an all-purpose negative intensifier. Bad. Bad and great. So we have bad-minded people, or he says cripple-minded is what Prabhupada gives it, or broad-minded people. And it says that the Duratmas, they serve their own senses instead of Krishna. They act out. Sometimes they act altruistically, but without relation to Krishna's service. And so he mentions this. He says sometimes people are very, philanthropic. They're concerned with, even all of humanity and things. But he says if there's not a contact with Krishna involved in that someplace, they may be very nice people and they may be doing good works, but it doesn't move them into transcendence. So he said there's a certain, so it's good. It's certainly better than others who don't think that way, but it isn't ultimately a spiritual thing. And he says they are under the control of the external material energy, and they suffer the threefold and the fourfold miseries. The fourfold miseries are birth, death, old age, and disease. And the threefold miseries, what are the suffering that comes from our own bodies and minds, suffering that comes from others and other entities, and suffering that comes from like acts of God, or the devatas, floods and heat and cold and things. Where he says the Mahatmas, they're only interested in the Lord's service. They're under the control of the internal spiritual energy, and they act in their natural constitutional manner. So he says, if we look at that, we want to become Mahatmas. We don't want to suffer, we want to become Mahatmas. And we want to find out how to do it. So then here's the 5 of them, the Atyahara, Lalyam, Prayasa, Prajalpa, and Janasanga. Prabhupada talks a lot about plain living and high thinking. He says other places, simple living and high thinking. So that we have time and energy to spend in our spiritual life. And so I said that these 5 are obstacles which prevent us having a simple life where we have time and energy. And I said this: the theme here is how to make Krishna consciousness a priority. And down at the bottom it says a good indication of the priority given to a particular endeavor is the amount of time and energy that's allocated for it. We can kind of tell if you want to know what our priorities are, look at what we do. You may know it very well, or you may be surprised if you look at actually how you behave and see what your priorities really are. Mm-hmm. So that's the point is that if we're going to progress in spiritual life, we're going to have to be able to allocate some time and energy to it. And if not, it's probably not a very high priority. So this is a good litmus test here to see what kind of a priority our spiritual lives are and see where we can maybe make changes to make it a higher priority. And so atyahara, the literal meaning is overeating, but it's also it means like overindulgence or trying to accumulate more and more and more. It's kind of the wanting more type of feeling. And it says it's related to considerations of security, comfort, and enjoyment. You always want to have enough, and you want to be certain of that. You can also, and it says, and the purpose, this can also refer to subtle things like having more and more knowledge, or he says even merging into Brahman, very spiritual, seemingly spiritual tasks. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his commentary on this, says that it's just basically we're trying to enjoy the different sensations and or the feeling of having accumulated so much. It's an enjoying mentality. Give me more, so I don't run out. Okay? And then there's lalyam, or ardent longing, or greed. And Prabhupada says being greedy for mundane achievements. This is more a kind of acquisitiveness. It's very there. Sometimes there's a place in the purport where the same thing is described as both atyahara and lalyam. They're closely related things. The way I see it is that the lalyam is you're looking for something different. With atyahara, you got more and more and more of something that you have, but that sometimes the lalyam, you're looking for something of a particular quality. People looking for the best thing, looking for certain achievements. You want to be the first person to climb Mount Everest, or you want the best of something, these sorts of things. So you want something different that you can get that you think will make you happy. And these usually are things you have to work hard to get to. And these two flow into the prayas, over endeavoring. Right? If you want more and more and more, and you want all kinds of great things, high quality, distinctive things, you're going to have to work for it. Generally, unless you're born rich or something, I suppose. That leads to really working hard for those things. If you have all these different goals, you want more and more and more, you want this, you want that, then you're going to have to work. That sucks up your time and energy. Mm-hmm. And then there's prajalpa. And the literal meaning is idle talk. That's the literal meaning, but it means, Prabhupada explains, all varieties of wasting time. So these things are not so goal-oriented. Atyahara means, I want this, I want more of this, more of this, more of that. Lalyam says, I need this, I need that, I need something else. They're driven. But prajalpa is just, we're using our time unproductively. And so, again, it takes up valuable time that could be used in the spiritual endeavor. And then the last one, jana sangha, is the beginning of a theme that's going to be developed here through the next several verses. It's going to appear in the next verse, and it's going to appear in 3 of the 4 that we study next time. Which indicates its extreme importance. So jana sangha is association with worldly-minded persons. Associating with non-devotees encourage us in the obstacles mentioned above. I think let's take a look here at the next slide. It says, Prabhupada says, those outside the Krishna conscious movement are interested in reading heaps of newspapers, magazines, and novels, solving crossword puzzles, and doing many other nonsensical things. In this fashion, people simply waste their valuable time and energy. In the Western countries, old men retired from active life play cards, fish, watch television, and debate about useless socio-political schemes. All these and other frivolous activities are included in the prajalpa category. There's a story where Prabhupada saw old men playing golf, and he asked what they were doing, and when they told him what it was, he started to cry. So he felt just like, oh, what a way. He did it, was it here? Because there's so many golf courses here. Oh man, amazing. And then about the jana sangha, Prabhupada says, one should always engage in the service of the Lord in the association of the Lord's devotees. Association with those engaged in a similar line of business is very conducive to advancement in that business. I'll call your attention to the jana sangha he's talking. He says you avoid the association of non-devotees, but here he talks about having the association of devotees. And because it's understood that we're social people. And if you don't have association of someone, you're going to have association of another. So he says, giving up the association of non-devotees will mean associating with persons interested. And he says that people in the regular world they make all kind of associations where they have common interests, and that helps them, build connections. It gives them ideas. That's a natural way that people further a certain interest. It may be something. He talks about the stock exchange and things, but also people have little clubs for every little thing they do. Orchid growing club and such that. And they all tell each other it's very important what they're doing. And they get ideas and shit and this kind of thing. So he has a tendency to transfer the notion of avoiding association, and that the result will be that we get association with other people on the spiritual path, on the path of bhakti. He does that repeatedly. And then he also mentions, this is kind of an aside, but it is interesting how he mentioned that all of this working so hard for things that aren't valuable to our spiritual life has not only effect on our spiritual life, but it has an effect on the world. And he says, unfortunately, materialists who have neither faith in the plan of God nor any aspiration for higher spiritual development misuse their God-given intelligence only to augment their material possessions. They devise many systems, such as capitalism and materialistic communism, to advance their material position. They are not interested in the laws of God or in a higher goal. Always anxious to fulfill their unlimited desires for sense gratification, they are conspicuous by their ability to exploit their fellow living beings. When human society gives up these elementary faults enumerated by Srila Rupa Goswami, all enmity will cease between men and animals, capitalists and communists, and so forth. In addition, all problems of economic or political maladjustment and instability will be solved. It's interesting, Prabhupada saw this kind of a global scale. That not only hurts us individually, but it hurts the whole world if we don't do this. Now, the one that didn't fit into the 5 categories of kind of the 4 of them wasted time and energy. There was the one that also encouraged you to do more if you have the wrong type of association. So you're dealing with other people who have those same type of goals. That's going to encourage you to keep doing those other 4 things. So those things all acted to try to divert our time and energy from spiritual activities. There was the 6th one that didn't fit into that category. It talked about how we act in our spiritual lives. And the word is called niyamagraha. And Prabhupada says it's practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. And he explains how it works. It's 2 words hooked together, and it can be hooked together in 2 different ways. So he says the word agraha with a long A means eagerness to accept, and agraha with a short A means failure to accept. By the addition of either of these 2 words to the word niyama, rules and regulations, so this is the rules of Shandi, joining words together, the word niyamagraha is formed. So if you have a long A and a long A, it still just stays a long A. If you have a long A and a short A, it's a long A again. So it has a dual meaning, he says. Thus, niyamagra has a 2-fold meaning that is understood according to the particular combination of words. So we're either eager to accept the niyama, rules, or regulations, or we fail to accept them. And both of these things can be harmful. Not following the rules and regulations is kind of easy to understand how that might be harmful. If there's a certain procedure for something that works, as I said here, bhakti is a well-established and well-understood process. And Srila Prabhupada often used the analogy of taking medications by following the instructions written on the label. So people have been doing bhakti for a very, very long time. And in different circumstances, in different places. And so it's really well understood how it works. It's not something that's a reinvention of the wheel every time. It's well understood. And so when it's described what to do and what not to do, it's not based on anything whimsical. It's from good old-fashioned long-time experience. So if you do something different, the chances of being successful are going to be a lot less. People have done it right, people have done it wrong. The effects are pretty well understood. So, like that. But it's hard to understand how by doing them it should be harmful. That doesn't make as much sense. And so the clarification is given. It's how we do them makes a lot of difference. So there are ways of doing them which are harmful. And he gives a few examples. I searched the Veda base a little bit and tried to find different references to niyamagraha. And he said, sometimes we can follow scriptural rules and regulations that aren't connected to bhakti. They're meant for for material prosperity or for liberation, karma or jnana, and be attached to those things. Maybe that's something we've been done. If we're in kind of the Vedic culture, maybe that's part of what our family has done. He says, then following less important rules to the detriment of more essential ones. So he says actually the spiritual master is supposed to teach the essence. And he was mentioning how he taught differently in India and America and the West. He said he has to focus on the essence. And he said for himself, he said that the sannyasis are supposed to walk everywhere. They're not supposed to use any form of conveyance. And he says, but in order for me to preach everywhere, he said, I even took airplanes. Right? So he disregarded one of the rules. So but if he would have followed the sannyasa ashram properly, he would have been damaging for his bhakti and damaging for all of us. He mentioned also how if he followed all the rules of sannyasa, even living here, he couldn't do it. It would either take up all his time. And when he first came, he was living with people who were doing all kind of forbidden things for him. His food was in the refrigerator with this one person, right, who was keeping the meat for his cat in the refrigerator with him, and that would have been a big no-no for an Indian sannyasi. But he did these things, and so he said I couldn't if I were to follow all the rules of sannyas perfectly, I couldn't have even stayed here. So following less important rules instead of which will be to the detriment of more essential ones. That's a kind of niyamagraha. The one that speaks to me the most and to us on a day-to-day basis is the last one. And following the essential rules, so now we're not doing something that's not bhakti or it's not less important rules, but without trying to make spiritual advancement. And what does that mean? Prabhupada he says, imitating, done without knowledge of the purpose, or following without seeing whether one is making spiritual advancement. So as if they're ends in themselves. If I simply somehow mechanically do them, that will be effective. Mm-hmm. So what happens is actually what we're doing is we're practicing the different rules of bhakti, trying to develop our bhakti. And so we have to bring that intention and attention to the practice. The practice is supposed to allow the bhakti to develop. We'll talk about this a little bit further on more. But what the rules and regulations are meant to do for us. But we have to do them thinking that these are the means to what I'm trying to attain. And therefore we have that intention and we have the attention to them. And then they become effective. Otherwise, it's less effective. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So, in fact, right now we're going to do it. I have a little experiment for you. We can do a little thought experiment, or even a physical one. All right. So now you're all sitting down. Think of some happy thought, something that is the thing you've been hoping for the most is just about to happen. You know it's going to happen, right? And you can either do it physically or just kind of mentally stand up and smile. All right. Try it. Stand up. Think of a wonderful thought, and then just stand up and be happy. Smile and be happy. All right. Hey, it's happening, man. Right? And when you move like that and you stand up, hopefully that initial happiness that came into your mind even increases more. Right? Because happiness has a certain expression. Right? Even it says when we read the way we read other people's emotions is actually our face mimics their facial expressions. And therefore we feel it. So that's how we tell what people feel by what they do. People who have Botox, they can't read other people's expressions very well because they can't mimic them. That's what happens. People do crazy. People study these things, okay? But they do. And now you do the same thing if you sit down and think of something angry and then, make an angry expression and clench your fists. Your anger is going to grow. Okay? I guess just in the interest of time, then I said, you can try this at home if you want later. Then the next time, just without thinking of something happy, just stand up with a smile. You may still feel a little happier, but not as much. And the same way, if you think angry thoughts, or if you don't think anything angry and you just clench your fist and, you might even laugh. It doesn't make sense to you. So this is what's supposed to happen in bhakti. So the next slide says, like anger and happiness, devotion is expressed, there's a little typo here, is expressed in certain common natural ways. So we can recognize when somebody's happy, when they're angry, when they're sad, by the way they do. So bhakti also has certain normal ways that it's expressed. There's love for God and across the individuals. So in sadhana, or the practice of devotional service, they practice these types of expressions, which come naturally for those whose devotion is more mature. So just like now, if we had a little anger, and we acted angry, we got more angry. Now if we have a little devotion, and we act like, not imitation, but we act in ways similar to people who have devotion, our devotion will increase. That's how it works. So it says whatever devotion is brought to the practice will be increased by the devotional activities. Just like when the expressions of happiness or anger enhance the initial happiness or anger in our experiment. But if they don't, if we just go through the motions of the activities, that's not going to have as much of an effect. So that's why Niyamagraha is there. This is, we'll hear that bhakti is something that's very active. That people who are feeling love for God will want to talk about Him. They'll want to, want to think about God. They'll want to do these things. They'll want to do practical service. That happens just right from their hearts. And so if we have a little bit of that in our heart, and then we do some of these things, it magnifies. The two things together, the intent and the proper activity. So now we're on to text 3. Actually, I was worried after the first one that we might have not enough time, but I think we're going to have time for discussion here. I think it's good. So, this is the 6 principles of success. You had the 6 things that destroyed bhakti. These 6 things are going to be listed here. It says produce success in our devotional service, and the little subtitle I've given is cultivating devotional service. How do we make the devotional service grow? So text 3, it's utsaha nishchaya dharyat tat karma pravartanat sangachagat satovrite shadbir bhakti prasidyati. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. 1, being enthusiastic. 2, endeavoring with confidence. 3, being patient. 4, acting according to the regulative principles, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. Hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. 5, abandoning the association of non-devotees. There we come again. Last time it says having the association was the obstacle. And now giving up that association is the thing that makes success. Again, this theme is continuing. Following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. The Sanskrit word is prasidyati. It advances or becomes successful. And Prabhupada in his purport, he says, devotional service is not a matter of sentimental speculation or imaginative ecstasy. Its substance is practical activity. So like I was mentioning, people who have devotion, they just don't sit there and feel it. They express it in so many different ways. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the incident where Narad Muni, as a little child, he encounters God directly. And he explained that all of his senses, he says, the way it's described is they were separately enlivened. He wanted to react with everything he had. That's how he does it. He wanted to, and with everything he had, he wanted to somehow express his love. And then for us, it says bhakti is a sort of cultivation. As soon as we say cultivation, we must refer to activity. Well. And so we're going to do it a little bit out of order because I think they're related in certain ways. So the main thing is the activity, what we do. So the word is tat karma pravartanat, performing various type of recommended devotional activities. So what do we do? This is practical activity. What are those practical activities? Right? And so Prabhupada lists in the purport, he gives from Prahlad Maharaj the 9 processes of devotional service that are familiar to many. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanavedanam. Like I said, there are a standard way to progress in devotional service, standard expressions of that. And so these are 9 of those. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his commentary, he mentions also from Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, that there are 64 principles, of which 5 are really important. We're also familiar with residing in the holy place, Mathura, worshiping the deity, reciting or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, serving the devotees or associating with them. This is given in a couple different ways, and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So these are all things we can do, activities that we can do that can increase our devotion. So it says we do the recommended activities, okay? But then there's a certain way to do them. Because you notice these things are a little bit general, especially the 9 principles. They're kind of general items. So how do we actually put them into practice? That comes with the sattva-vritti, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. And Prabhupada says in the purport, he says, and so I was saying that the acharyas concretely demonstrate the practical application of tat tat karma pravartanat. There are people who are doing these things. How do they do them? So Prabhupada says, in this Krishna consciousness movement, we require everyone to rise early in the morning by 4 a.m. and attend Mangal Arati, or morning worship, then read Srimad Bhagavatam, perform kirtan, and so forth. Thus we hold continuous activities in devotional service 24 hours daily. This is called sattva-vritti, or following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas who expertly filled every moment of time with Krishna conscious activities. So there's kind of general categories of activities, and then we can see how people actually do them. So Prabhupada gave us a whole different ways. This is more for temple residents, but he gave so many other ways that we can serve around our temples and in our homes. And so we can follow the example of those who do it. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that we can look back into the far past and look at people who had devotion, but if we look more towards the time of Lord Chaitanya and his followers, we can see how to apply it in this day and age. So one of the things that Srila Prabhupada did, he carried on, his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he tried to show how devotional service could be applied in the modern world. At the time of his appearance, the only genuine followers of Lord Chaitanya were these Babajis, very renounced people living in isolation. A path that not many people can follow, and not something that could be exported. But Lord Chaitanya has said that this bhakti should spread all over the world. And so it was really it started by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but really Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati found out how to adapt it to be done in general society, and it's to spread throughout the world. How can you because these Babajis, they would live, they would chant 20 hours a day, barely eat, extreme austerity. It wasn't practical for most people. So how to use the principles that Lord Chaitanya taught and let it be practical around the world, and that's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did. He started a society that did that. Prabhupada followed him almost to the letter, with a few other adaptations for the West. And so he showed us how the devotion can be practiced here and now. So it becomes more precise, more concrete than just the general principles. Yeah, so we follow the example of people who are doing it in practice. And so it helps to show us exactly, precisely how to go about it. And then there's those 3 related qualities. So those other two were related. One was the general principle, and then one was specific application. Then there's next three are really closely aligned with one another. And so there's utsaha or enthusiasm, dharyat patience, and nischayat confidence. And Prabhupada defines them. He says, endeavor executed with intelligence in Krishna consciousness is called utsaha, or enthusiasm. The devotees find the correct means by which everything can be utilized in the service of the Lord. The execution of devotional service is not a matter of idle meditation, but practical action in the foreground of spiritual life. So if we're really into something, we try to find how we can do it as much as possible. We find a way to integrate it into as many areas of our life as we possibly can. So if we're really enthusiastic about bhakti, he says they will try all the different ways to integrate it into their lives. So they'll find all these different ways. So it shows that we're eager to do it. Then patience, he says, these activities must be executed with patience, One should not be impatient in Krishna consciousness. Indeed, this Krishna consciousness movement was started single-handedly by Srila Prabhupada. In the beginning, there was no response. But because we continued to execute our devotional activities with patience, people gradually began to understand the importance of this movement, and now they are eagerly participating. One should not be impatient in discharging devotional service, but should take instructions from the spiritual master and execute them with patience, depending on the mercy of Guru and Krishna. And then confidence. This is faith, really. Nishchat, by confidence, this engagement in the devotional service of the Lord is the life and soul of the living entity. It is the desired goal and supreme perfection of human life. One has to become confident about this, and one also has to be confident that all activities other than devotional service, such as mental speculation, fruitive work, or mystic endeavor, will never yield any enduring benefit. So it is the best thing and the only valuable thing. So that's one element of confidence. And devotional service is so pure and perfect that once having begun, one is forcibly dragged to ultimate success. This is one of the most amazing statements I think in all of Prabhupada's books. And he says, devotional service is ahoitiki apratihata, continuous and unmotivated. It is not the effect of any mundane cause, nor can it be terminated by any mundane cause or permanently curtailed by any material interruption. So he says, it works. It's the best thing, and it works. It's really going to work. And he says, the devotee thinks, Avasya Rakshibe Krishna. Krishna will certainly protect me and give me help for the successful execution of devotional service. This is called confidence. Okay? So it works. Why does it work? Well, because Krishna helps us. So it's the most wonderful thing. It works because Krishna helps us. So now let's show how enthusiasm and patience come naturally from this confidence or faith. There's a little chart here, and so I summarized the confidence of there, because Krishna helps his devotees. Ultimate success is guaranteed, and Krishna consciousness is the supreme perfection of human life, and nothing else has enduring value. So if we're confident of those things, if we're convinced of those things, and to the extent that we are, naturally we're going to think, great, right? If I tell you, here's something that you want, but you can't get it. But I say, here's the thing you want. That thing you really wanted all these years? You can get it. Immediately, you're happy, right? Immediately you want to jump up and, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? It produces happiness. This is the when we talk about a bij, a seed of an activity, those are the two components. Something desirable with a means to get it. That immediately produces a certain, let's go for it. Really? What can I do? Right? So if something is not interesting and attainable, that doesn't produce any enthusiasm. If it's wonderful but unattainable, again, we think about it wistfully. Okay? But then patience, okay? Because it says one is naturally enthusiastic about something of great value that's readily obtainable. And patience, one will be willing to persist in even a challenging endeavor if the result is certain and the payoff is great. Right? Something is worth waiting for, isn't it? If it's really, really valuable, and you know that it's going to work eventually. Right? Sometimes you might think, it may be really, really valuable, but we think, oh God, maybe we'll never get it. Then we'll give up. But if we know it's really, really valuable, and we know it's going to work, we'll persist. And those two things, the patience balances out the enthusiasm. What we have usually happens in Krishna consciousness is that people come in contact with it and they get some positive reinforcement from it. They feel something wonderful that happens right away. Krishna reciprocates right away. And that makes the enthusiasm grow. Wow, it's working, it's happening for me. This is called utsaha mai, kind of a hyper enthusiasm that takes place. And then they run into some obstacle. And that's when the patience is tested. Because when everything is going great, let's go more and more and more and more, boom, and, oh no. Then you have to do a gut check. What do I really think? And that comes back to our back to the faith. When these two things are nicely in balance, then you have a steady enthusiasm, regardless of whether things are going really well or not. And when the faith is not so strong, you kind of get a fluctuation of that. You have to think about it. Oh, maybe is it really worth it? Is it really going to work for me? Is it going to be all this and that? So if we find that we're out of balance in some of these ways, we have to look back at our confidence. What's our level of confidence? Is there, we can restore balance in these things. Wow, do I really think it can happen for me? And why should I think that? One of the things that we should happen in Bhakti Shastri, we should become more confident. The confidence comes from two things. It grows and develops. It comes from our understanding and knowledge, but it also comes from our experience. So if we first come to Krishna consciousness, have so many things happen so quickly, even if that stops, we already saw that it works. We shouldn't forget that. Now we have to, maybe we have to be a little bit patient to work through some more difficult obstacles. That means we're working on developing our confidence more and more. So the last of the six things is the Sangha Chagat, again, giving up the association of non-devotees. In Prabhupada, in the purport, it mentions this. Once Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked by one of his householder devotees about the general principles of Vaishnavism, as well as the general routine activities of the Vaishnava. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately replied, Asat Sangha Chaga e Vaishnava Achara. Characteristically, a Vaishnava is one who gives up the association of worldly people or non-devotees. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has therefore recommended Tandera Charana Seva Bhakti Sanavas. One has to live in the company of pure devotees and execute the regulative principles laid down by the previous acharyas, the six Goswamis. If one lives in the association of devotees, there is little chance of associating with non-devotees. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is opening many centers just to invite people to live in the company of devotees and practice the regulative principles of spiritual life. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but especially since we keep hearing this association thing, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions something interesting, because he explains that one cannot avoid being in the proximity of and having interactions with non-devotees. We may notice that. It is the quality of the association which defines the association. So he mentions, especially for, of course, maybe if people are brahmacharis or sannyasis or even vanaprasthas, people who are retired people who don't have to work in the world, interact in the world, maybe it's possible to simply be with other devotees. Those Babajis were doing like that. They were deep into the forest and just associating with one another. But for most of the rest of us, we have to do it. We can't avoid, he says, the proximity, is how he puts it, of others. And so he says it's not the proximity that defines association. He says it's the type of association, the type of relationship that you have. And first of all, he defines it as love. And then he says even we may have love for family members. But he says what it comes down to is how much importance we give to it, how much we open ourselves, how much we deal with the ultimate things, how much we're modeling ourselves on them. Right? The depth and the quality of the relationship. And so the more that if we have deep relationships with others who have a different idea of the world, we'll be drawn in that direction. Right? But if not, then maybe we even can help them. Maybe we can give them a little hint of something. Maybe they'll just be happy to see if we're happy and nice individuals. They might be impressed with us. So it's not that we you have to go to the boss and I can't even email you. That's association. And run away and never talk to your family members again. But it's the quality of it. So the deepest relationships we should have with the devotees. And that will nurture our faith and nurture our devotional service. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I just wanted to bring that up now. Now I tried to, on the next slide, to sum up text 3, because it's a list of 6 things, but I don't think we should see it exactly as a list of 6 separate things. It's 6 aspects of one kind of endeavor. And so I said, with faith, I took my shot at it here. With faith that inspires enthusiasm and persistence on the path, one should, in the association of devotees, practice devotional service following the example of previous acharyas. So then it's one thing. You're doing one thing. That's what's being said here. Because sometimes we tend to have here's a checklist of 6 things. Let me do this, but they're meant to relate to one another and support each other in that way. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the section as a whole. We covered the individual verses, and I do think it does have a certain cohesion. These 3 verses. Excuse me. And so I took my little, modified my little diagram from before, where you have confidence, enthusiasm, and patience. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he mentions how verse 1 integrates into this. And it fits what we said before. So if we don't have control over the urges of the senses, then we're all over the place. We can't have a coherent activity. We can't do something that's coherent and purposeful, because we're always distracted by this, taken away by that. So the horses are running off the path is what's happening to us. Right. So he recognizes that as an element, another part of patience. There's the patience that says we should wait for the result because we know that Krishna can help us. But also, you'll notice that there's the words, the dhiryat and dhira, they have the same root. You see, so the dharyat, that patience, and the dhiram, the sobriety, are the same. So he says that part of that patience is also being able to do things and being very steady and not being distracted and all over the place. So that first verse helps with the patience. It fits into that because we're not constantly being pulled this way and pushed that way by our unrestricted senses. We can focus on the task at hand. So it has 2 elements. He mentions also the waiting for results as that's the one that Prabhupada focuses on, but he mentions that. And then, if you look at it also, in text 2, we're trying to see, to make bhakti a priority, trying to extract that as a priority as against all the different things that seem to be prevalent in our lives. And that also will come from confidence. If you think this is a wonderful endeavor that you can succeed in, you'll want to make time for it. Right? You want to try to see if you can make it a focus. Naturally, it'll become a priority. Not only will you want to do it, but you want to be able to do it, a lot. So people who are really, have great enthusiasm for something, they'll find ways to do it. They'll watch it if they like sports. They'll watch it on TV. They'll read about it in the papers. They'll go online. They'll play. They'll find ways to do it all the time. You make it a priority. So the sections fit together. So the main thing is we're doing here is we're practicing the devotional service. It needs the support of association with devotees. You have to follow the path that's been laid out by all the previous acharyas and other practitioners. And if you have the confidence in that, you'll make it a priority. You'll do it enthusiastically, and you'll have patience in doing it. Mm-hmm. And you'll try to, because you'll notice that the means that we use to control the senses are also part of the tat karma pravartana. They're the activities also of devotional service. What Bhaktivinoda Thakur says is that in the second verse, you're talking more about you're making a decision to make it a priority, and so he says that he calls it constitutional. Whereas in the first verse, you're dealing with urges that happen to pop up. So that's why you see it's repeated. There's controlling the tongue, and then there's atyahara, overeating in the second one. There's controlling the speaking urge, and then there's prajalpa. So one is more like your intelligence. I've decided to make such and such a priority, but then sometimes things come out. How do you deal with the little eruptions of the senses? Right? Again, you bring them into the Krishna conscious sphere of activity. That's what you do. Mm-hmm. So trying again to sum up the whole section, with faith that leads one to make bhakti important in one's life and that inspires enthusiasm and persistence on the path, one should in the association of devotees practice devotional service, engaging the urges of the senses and following the example of previous acharyas. You can almost, it's a little bit clumsy, but anyway, you can kind of see it as being one thing. So what's being said here. I want to talk a little bit about practical application, and we'll have discussion. So a little bit about, because if you look at these things in a very kind of straightforward way, let's give a little slide here. So there's a couple things that vary how we will apply it. There's it says that the way we apply it varies by our varna and ashram, and by our level of faith. So, if someone is, a brahmacharya, sannyasi, a vanaprastha, or a babaji, who only has no other engagement than devotional service, they don't have to support themselves. They can apply these things that we talked about very directly, and that's it. They only talk about Krishna. They only hear about Krishna. They only associate and are in proximity with devotees. They only, all the different things they do completely. They make it a very, very, they can apply these very, very literally and straightforward way. But with others who have to work in the outside world, have families, have other things that are important to them, they can't do that. You can't, when the boss talks to you, you can't say, "Oh, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead." You got to write your report properly. You have to give them the right. You have to interact with them. You can't. He said you can't hide in your room. Well, you can't do it. So in that way, there's a couple of examples that were given by our past acharyas who were taking the process very seriously. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had an outside job. He worked as a magistrate. He was very efficient. The British thought he was just a genius because he could hear so many cases so quickly. And he was super productive. And so he got his business done with the least amount of effort, quickly hearing so many cases. And he spent a lot of the rest of his time, writing and preaching and organizing different groups and things. Like he's the one who started the Bhakti Vriksha groups and all these kinds of things, Namahata. And wrote so many books, that kind of stuff. And the way he said it is that he looked at it that his family were all devotees. So when he was going outside and doing his work as a magistrate, by supporting them, he was serving the devotees. So he took that it was part of his devotional service. So all the things he had to do that were not seemingly directly devotional, indirectly they were. And Srila Prabhupada, he seemed to really violate what it says here. He was doing this prayasa. And he was trying to become a super wealthy businessman. And he almost made it on a couple of different occasions. His idea was that he was going to use the money in supporting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's mission. He said later he said that Krishna made him a business failure because Krishna had a different way he wanted him to serve. But he was very close. He had a couple of different pharmaceutical companies, and he was quite ambitious with it. He talks how he used to break up his chanting at different times of the day. He also used to help the devotees. He associated with the members of the Gaudiya Math. They'd stay with him sometime. He would help the local Math. He also did other devotional activities, but that was one of his focuses. He was going to try to become a big pharmaceutical guy. And he thought he would use that money. So in that way also he was considering that activity to be devotional service. Right? Now, to the degree that you can do that also depends on your level of faith. Because the Nectar of Instruction is kind of really written for people who have a lot of faith and are going to take up devotional service with quite a bit of enthusiasm. But in ISKCON, we're trying to bring people. And so you have all people on all different levels of faith, and the faith, like I said, is something that develops over time. You just don't walk in the door and suddenly, I believe devotional service is everything, and the only thing and the most important thing and all that sort of thing. Right? So I kind of looked at kind of different levels. So say someone has a very tender faith and they're interested. What should they do? Right? You can't really ask them to have a thoroughgoing application of all these principles. So what they should do is associate with the devotees and try to do something positive that attracts them, basically. They like prasadam, they like kirtan. If they're listening to, if they're interested in the philosophy, maybe they're listening to the classes and things like that. They should do something in bhakti that is attractive to them, and they should associate with the devotees so that will nurture their faith. They will get some reciprocation by their service or their activity, and they will, by associating with the devotees, they will also, their faith will be increased. Someone maybe have a little bit stronger faith, and they make it more of a priority. So then they can look more closely at text number 2 and see how they can invest more of their time and energy in it. Then you may have somebody for whom bhakti is a top priority, right? You can have someone who's just barely interested, someone who kind of becomes a priority, and you have somebody who makes it now it's the top priority. Right? Then they can do even more, and maybe they want to try to become more steady in their practice. They can do all those things to a greater degree. But really, what it's supposed to be, if you look at confidence, is it's supposed to be the only priority. That's faith at its higher level. It's supposed to be the only priority. And in that case, you have to do like Srila Prabhupada did or Bhaktivinoda Thakur did and find a way that all your other things somehow relate and that it's not an artificial thing. So you may be doing other things, but how does that contribute to my overall plan of becoming Krishna conscious? And then that becomes a more thoroughgoing application. So depending on your circumstances in the world, your lifestyle, and your level of faith, you're going to approach these things in a little bit different way. And it takes a certain amount of intelligence, it takes some maybe discussion with other people in your similar situation to really come up with the exact blueprint for your life. So that's all I have. We got a few minutes at least left. We can have a discussion, comments and questions, complaints, need for clarification. I hope it was at least a little clearer than mud. And so someone.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
You have to speak kind of loudly and directly into it, but it'll come out.
Yeah, it was really helpful, all these like 3 texts which you covered. But I had a question, like I didn't understand it properly. It was like this Sangha Tyagat, like where it says that like you have to give up the association of non-devotees. But I had a query, like if we don't associate with the non-devotees, then how will it be easy to preach them and bring to Krishna consciousness then?
Yeah, of course, that's another type of allowed. And again, association means you're developing real relationships with them in a way that you're sharing also their ideas and intentions, right? That you confide in them. What you're going to do is, if you're trying to give Krishna consciousness to others, right? You're building a relationship based on what you're giving them, right? It's not as much of a two-way street. You're trying to understand where they're coming from, how you can help them as much way as possible, but it's more of a one-way street. They're not like you. Like if you have a relationship with another devotee, you're talking intimately about Krishna consciousness. You're sharing your mind and your heart. It's a much closer, loving relationship. Where here, you're doing it with love, but you're understanding that you're trying to help them. So it's not the kind of association that's going to. Hopefully, the association is going to bring them forward, upwards, not going to bring you down. So it's the intimacy of the association, the love, the sharing, these kind of things that make it real association. So okay. Sometimes we use the example. Say we're giving our association rather than taking it. Sometimes it's said sometimes given like that.
Yeah, a small comment on the association part. It's like just like you said, it's more about giving your own association rather than taking their association. So if you're among a group of people who are drinking wine, you don't go and associate until the point that you start drinking wine. Instead, it means that you're taking the association. So if you give your association, you can say like Prabhupada says, even I'm the taste in the wine. Krishna says is the taste in the wine. So that's giving association. So I had a technical question on text-free. If you read the translation of text-free, the tat karma parvatanat.
Vartanat.
Yeah. So the translation reads as various activities favorable for devotional service, right? And parvatanat means performing. So it means performance of the various activities favorable for devotional service. And if we look in the translation, it's the number 4. And number 4 says acting according to regulatory principles. So it's like a bit confusing if we talk about acting according to regulatory principles.
Well, but it's such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam.
Yeah.
So
Usually, if you think about regulatory principles, it's like the 4 regulatory principles that we are.
No, but
devotees.
it means those, but it also means the positive things we do. The regulations also mean acting. Like Prabhupada says that the devotional service, the sum and substance of it is practical action. So he and Bhaktivinoda Thakur both talk about these things that you do. So the 4 things, the niyamas, the things you don't do, also are included. But it's primarily the focus is on what you do. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. So it's just the language that Prabhupada is using there. But those are also regulations. Those are the tat karma, are the things that you do, as well as the things you don't.
So it means that these
It means both
Shravanam,
things.
Kirtanam, Smaranam, they are like regulative principles.
Those are
of
regulative
bhakti.
principles, yeah. Because they regulate your behavior, right? And instead of doing something else, you're going to serve Krishna. You're going to hear about Krishna, speak about Krishna, remember Krishna. Those are regulations. Yeah, that's also a regulation. It regulates your behavior.
Thank you.
Yeah. It includes the don'ts as well.
I have a question regarding those constitutional urges as compared to the. I just
No, it's just that when in the second verse it says we're making kind of a general kind of blanket thing that we're going to engage in Krishna's service. I'm going to use my I'm going to think about Krishna, hear about Krishna, worship Krishna at all times, right? In some way try to make it connected. The first one is like, but you're still going to have impulses at time to do something else, right? So the one thing is more on the level of intelligence, that I'm going to devote myself to the Krishna service, but then even when we do that, then little urges come out. And so the first verse is about dealing with those urges. Even though I've decided to do such and such and such and such, now I want to gossip. Really bad. How to deal with that. So that's dealing with those things that come out, that the impulses that come out, that even though we've made up our mind to do something, we have that experience.
It's interesting that he starts with the negative, like on the second verse he lists the things that you shouldn't do, and the third verse he lists the things that you should do. And I don't know, I mean, I kind of understood it at the end where you were saying, because the first verse kind of leads into the second in that sense. But is there any other reason he's,
just because we want to make room for it, I think, because in order to do the things that we're asking to do, we have to make some room for it. And so if all of our priorities are elsewhere, and all of our time and energy is sapped up with something else, and it's very difficult even to make progress in that area. So that was the only thing I can think of.
So the first 2 verses are about making room in our lives so that we can actually do the third verse.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. The first one to be able to do it on a steady basis, and the second one in order to have time and energy, available from your busy life.
Yeah.
To even take it up. Otherwise, we're going to put it on hold. Maybe next year.
Yeah, indeed. Confidence is the same as faith?
Certainly seems like it to me. Yeah, I think they're pretty much interchangeable. It's like a shraddha. Because actually that's what happens. It says when we get the seed of devotional service, then we have that thing. We see something that's really valuable, worshiping Krishna. And Prabhupada says that the rules and regulations, he calls that also sometimes the seed, because we have a means to do it. So there's a goal and a means by which we can attain it. And that leads to a natural enthusiasm. That's how bijas work, that you have something valuable and a means. So it's really the same thing, right? That confidence means you have faith in that, that's what it is. It's, I think, interchangeable, really, words. You could call that shraddha if you wanted.
I liked how you called it enduring value.
Oh, that was a quote from Prabhupada. I think that's directly quoted Prabhupada from that. He's nothing else endures. I think so. I just paraphrased him on that.
I have a few more points, but if there's other questions, you can swing around to me.
I have one question, related to Mataji's question. Once I heard, if we start engage ourselves in things favorable to devotional service, automatically things unfavorable to devotional service will go down, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it will be if we're attracted to devotional service. Generally, of course, it means we have a little bit less of an attraction, right? But we also may have very strong attachments because as people we have a lot of inertia. We're creatures of habit, and we think the same things, we do the same things. Like sometimes when people try to break a bad habit, like typically when people used to try to quit smoking, one of the things you tell people to do is to do something else at the time when they usually would have a cigarette craving. People eat and then they smoke. So after you eat, do something different. Right? So even if you're trying to anytime we try that, oftentimes we try to change our behavior, we keep finding that situation where the old behaviors keep wanting to come out, even if we have really good reasons for it. We want to change, but we find it difficult to. So they don't always automatically go. The practice of devotional service, Prabhupada says, he says, of course, that control of the senses involves this. What does he say? What did he call it? Real knowledge, development of real knowledge. So if we engage in devotional service and we get what we usually call the higher taste, right? That also encourages us and it makes us be less attracted to other things. So in some ways it also diminishes it, but we have to do both things. Because of the strong attachments we have to our negative activities, we have to do a little of both. That's why you'll see in our teachings, Prabhupada talks so much about the threefold miseries and the fourfold miseries. What we're really supposed to do is just engage everything in Krishna's service. But we're so used to doing these other things that we have to remember that we're on a bad path. And we need to have some motivation to try to get out of it. So both things are necessary.
One more question. While explaining Achahara,
Atyahara, yeah.
You told spiritual accumulating, like merging into Brahman.
Yeah, that's what it's mentioned. It's mentioned in the purport that looking for mystic powers or merging into Brahman. That's that's also kind of an acquisition. You're trying to acquire something enjoyable, right? So if you're in Brahman, you'll never be dissatisfied. You become self-satisfied. So that's what's wanting more and more, in one sense, because right now, even if you acquire so much money, it may run out at some time. But if you acquire mystic powers, even merging into Brahman, where you'll be self-satisfied for eternity, or you think anyway.
Mystic powers I can understand, kind of accumulating redundant stuff.
Yeah.
But merging into Brahman, an impersonalist may believe that is the highest for him.
Yeah. Well, see, the other part of Atyahara is having enough so that you can just be happy all the time, so you can enjoy. You see, it's the notion of trying to achieve happiness through, usually material sensations, various sensations, and happy. But there, if you merge into Brahman, you feel like you're just going to be just blissful all the time. So and again, it's not a devotional thing. It's not trying to please Krishna. It's trying to have happiness for yourself.
Still, he is the center.
Yeah. So it's an extreme form of Atyahara. Extreme form.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I have a question regarding two questions actually. One is the text title you are using on the six principle of success, and
Yeah, well, that came just
that you decided.
Yeah,
Okay,
it comes. This is a description really of the verse.
Okay, what is the first one actually? I missed the first one.
Well, let me look here. And slideshow. Text 1. Krishnaizing the urges of the mind and senses, controlling the senses.
Controlling the senses.
And then the subtitle is Krishnaizing the urges of the mind and senses.
So based on the purport or based on the text you have.
I wanted to try to be able to give you an idea what we're talking about.
Okay, that's a good
the
one.
theme of that particular thing. So yeah, that wasn't in part of the text. That's my
Right. And
my addition.
second one, in the second purport, text 2, where it is saying like the devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. So does that mean like any progress you have made towards the spiritual advancement, it will totally gone, or like
No, because there's no loss or diminution. Prabhupada, Bhagavad Gita says it means that you'll stop, though your progress will stop.
I see.
You'll stop. You won't be able to make progress with that.
So, but whatever you made, like because in the Gita,
Yeah, it says
he said
there's
like
no loss
there's
or
nothing
diminution.
you are
That's what
losing.
Prabhupada
Never.
says like that. Yeah. It's not that it's gonna destroy everything, but it will. But you can be stopped.
Right.
Progress will be stopped.
So advancement will stop. Or
Yeah,
you will
exactly.
All right.
It's 12 o'clock, so I'd like to try to honor start on time and end on time. Couple of things. Of course, Gary's here probably for a little bit. If there's any questions right now, on Wednesday night there'll be a call.
And anybody who hasn't registered online
Right.
should do so, because what I'm going to do is we're going to have a group email. We'll have it's a MailChimp. Gopinath is going to arrange it, and it'll be little notes for next time, what we're going to cover. It'll also have a link to the week's PowerPoint presentation, and it will give instructions for, because on Wednesdays, we'll have a conference call. It won't cover new material, but it will give us a chance for more discussion. And that's optional, but we'll give the way to call into that on the email as well. So otherwise, we won't know how to send it to you. So if you register, then we'll have your emails. And so you just go to our website, iskanatc.org, and on the home page, there's we have this little banner that changes from one picture to another, and you click on Bhakti Shastri, and then you can register on that.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Because I was going to get everybody to give them their emails now, but that's even easier. Go on the website. You can also, we have 2 more weeks with this section, then we're going to take a Saturday off, and then start the next module. We'll be posting that on the e-news as well. And you can encourage people, even if they miss this first class, they can listen to the recording. That'll go up on SoundCloud, and they can join in next week, even if you miss a class, whatever, if your schedule can't allow you to be here. Catch up, join in the Wednesday night class. The tests are going to be open book, right, Giri?
Yes, because we're going to have people be able to do it remotely. And so that means there's no way to know whether you're using the book or not. So therefore, it has to be allowed.
Right. Faith and confidence.
Yes.
But the whole point is also just to help us all kind of dig deep into these books and see how they can speak to us, what they can move us to do, how they can move us on this journey.
The benefit is that we won't just want to make it information acquisition, but that we can have still some understanding and of what's being covered. I think that's the benefit of having essay type exams and things like that, open book essay type exams. I hope that we see the connections between the different topics and that kind of stuff, and our understanding of bhakti becomes deeper.
Wonderful. See you all next week, we hope. Thank you, Hare Krishna.